Hello and welcome to Your Lettings Journey, the podcast for landlords with property in Enfield and surrounding areas.
I'm Kaz.
And I'm Rachel.
And together we put the sales and lettings into Belvoir Sales and Lettings Enfield.
We have decades of experience as landlords, tenants and agents, and we want to share it with you, our clients and local landlords to help you on your lettings journey.
Navigating the minefield that is the private rental sector.
We promise you topical debate,
expert industry guests,
and honest opinions,
even if they are a little controversial.
We hope you enjoy. The Your Lettings Journey podcast is produced by Belvoir Sales and Lettings Enfield. For more information, visit www.belvoir.co.uk/Enfield.
Hi and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 4 of Your Lettings Journey.
And this week we're still looking at what happens when your tenant says they're leaving, in particular the checkout process. Hope you enjoy. So hello and welcome back to Your Lettings Journey. And this week we are going to be talking about the next subject in what happens after your tenant hands in a notice, and we're looking at the checkout process.
Yes, we seem to have been doing quite a few of those lately.
We do. Actually, a lot of them. I think people have started moving again. We're trying to work out what's actually caused this to happen, but we have had a number of checkouts recently.
For me, most of the checkouts have been because the tenants have outgrown the homes that they're in.
True. I think probably people have been hanging on a bit since COVID.
It could also be true, yeah.
And then, so obviously COVID, nobody really wanted to move, and then prices started skyrocketing. And I think with rent increases, the properties that were cheap are now getting, that people are in, are getting more expensive and closer to normal prices. As people are thinking, okay, well, we'll move on.
Yeah, if I'm going to pay £1,000 for a one bedroom, I now need two bedrooms. I'll pay the 1.4. Okay, my pricing might be
completely off there, but it is early in the morning. So yes, there is that, and then we've also had obviously enforced moves where landlords have been setting up, because we have had a few landlords set up. And also where tenants have decided they want to buy now, I think. So there's been a good variety of reasons there. So we are now very proficient, because it's all very recent, this moving out of people. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that, and we have structured it this week. We have been advised to add a little bit more structure. So we are talking about the 10 tips, our top 10 tips for a successful checkout. But before we go there, last week, Kaz, what's your last week been all about?
My last week has been checking people out.
Yes.
Oh dear. Who knew? Well, fire safety is done.
And fire safety. Yeah, so right. We'll be coming back to the fire safety amendments soon. Maybe not next week, but the week after, possibly. I think we'll be doing that. And my last week has been focused mainly on the salesy side of things. And getting ready for what will come this week with the deposits and returning deposits. But
your holiday is not over, and I am back.
Holiday is now well and truly over, and I am back in the swing of things. Excellent. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about the checkout process. And the one thing I think to remember during the checkout process is your aim is to get through this with all parties unscathed. This is the one time in a tenancy when it's most likely for there to be a disagreement, some bad feeling, mixed expectations, and it's going to be potentially quite stressful. Very expensive for the tenant, and also expensive for the landlord, for you as landlord, with potential work to be done as a result. So the aim at the beginning, remember this, stick it on a board, is your aim is to get through this without lots of stress and maintaining the relationship you have with your tenant. So hopefully it's a good one, and you will be able to maintain that.
The direct communication through the tenancy agreement itself.
Through the tenancy. Right, one thing at this moment, because Kaz has just told me this. So we had a tenant who moved out recently, and we took a little bit longer to return their deposit because we were trying to communicate with the landlord and because I was on holiday. And Kaz has just advised me today that that tenant, who was a little bit upset, has subsequently asked her to dog sit for him. They're a monster of a dog, an absolute monster of a dog. And unfortunately, Kaz can't do that for the weekend because Kaz has her own dog and he doesn't like other dogs. So Kaz is now going to have the keys to their new place to go around and walk said dog while they're away for the weekend.
Take care of him and all sorts, yes.
And I just thought that is a testament to fabulous property management and tenant relations. So there you go. Well done, Kaz.
Didn't take anything personally.
I did. But anyway, so 10 tips for a fabulous checkout. Number 1, I'm going to pass on to Kaz, is the preparing in advance. So what do you do to prepare in advance?
Well, we've already spoken about when your tenant gives notice. And the first thing I do is say, right, here's your inventory for when you first moved in. And then we pop around and do a pre-visit just to say, right, these are the things that could need addressing when you leave, or these are the things that do need addressing when you move out.
These are the things that don't look good now, so you sort them before.
So it's just preparing them as well for the move. You don't want them suddenly to be rushing around, and then before they know it, at the end of the day, they don't actually have time to do what they need to do. And this is where being candid with your tenants in the past, where you've gone, but we have spoken about this, you need to address this before you move out. Again, they know about it, we're reminding them, so hopefully they do actually do all of this work before they move out.
And before it becomes a stressy issue. I agree. And there's 2 things I would add to that. Number 1 is to make sure that you put all of that in writing, because worst case scenario, they don't do the things that you've asked them to do. When you do come to submit your claim to one of the deposit schemes, the fact that you have it written down that 2 weeks beforehand you went to the property and you recommended they did X, Y, Z will all stand in your favour for making that claim. It's all evidence. And getting together the evidence at the end is a real pain. So having that to hand is good. But also, if there are surprise things that you end up needing to claim for, the fact that they've worked on the things that they knew about or that you knew about means that there will be more money available left in the deposit to be able to make a claim on. So if you just turn a blind eye to specific damages, it may mean that at the end of the tenancy that takes up all of the deposit and you then don't have any deposit left to claim for cleaning. So always worth doing that. You also mentioned something very important there, which was the inventory, because we are assuming that there is an inventory.
Well, to be fair, if you don't have an inventory for when they moved in, is there a real point of doing one when they've moved out? What evidence have you got to support yourself?
Generally we would say to people, if you don't have a deposit, it's pretty much not worth making any kind of claim, because you have to evidence how a property was at the beginning. There are certain occasions where you may have a receipt for the property having just been decorated. So if someone's painted it, you may have a receipt for that. That's fine. You may have a receipt for the property having just been cleaned immediately beforehand. But you're making your life much more difficult.
Very hard.
So the first part of preparing in advance is make sure that at the beginning you had an inventory. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is making sure that your tenant understands the process and what to expect.
Or what to do. So when on the day of moving out. So here now what you have to do is you need to phone them up and say, right, what time and on what date are we going to come around and collect the keys? And this is, if it's on a Sunday, generally they will drop the keys off here and we will do the inspection the following day, the move-out inspection. It is best to have the tenant with you while you're doing the move-out inspection. But they need to understand date, time, and the process in doing that. If they can't meet for that move-out, we just send them the results afterwards. But they do have to have the opportunity to be there.
And again, I would generally say to follow that up in writing, because I'm coming across as being very much on the negative side of this, but I'm always like worst case scenario and making sure that you have the best evidence. So yes, you can have a conversation with your tenant and say, we're going to do the checkout on this day. Is that fine? Yep, this time, let's agree it. But if they, for whatever reason, don't make it to that, you need to have it in writing, because then, again, that supports you at the end, because you need to give them the opportunity to be there. And if you can evidence that you did that, all the better. But the other thing about showing or making sure that they understand the process is what actually happens when you're there. Because if you're doing a checkout on a 3, 4, what have you, bedroom property,
Taking time.
It will take time, because you need to go around it really quite carefully. You have that one opportunity to do it. You can't come back 3, 4, 5 days later and say, oh, I also spotted this. I also spotted this. You need to have that record on the day. So you need to make sure that the tenant understands that it's not going to be a quick process.
No.
It's not a 5-minute run around the house. It is a look at things carefully, open drawers, open cupboards, all that kind of thing. Close inspection, photographs, and also written. And best will in the world, you need them to actually be a bit quiet doing this. I haven't worked out the best way to say that, but it's not a time to be having general chit chat because you're going to miss something. And you also don't want them following you around and saying, "Oh, but that wasn't me. That was me. What are you taking a picture of here?" You don't want that. So depending on the relationship and how the tenancy's gone, you may have a different version of what "please keep quiet while I'm doing it" will actually mean.
Yet, then what do we come to in there? We're coming to point 3 that we've made,
Yes.
where we're saying get a third party.
There's one other thing, though, that I would add to making sure the tenant understands, which I find is really important, and that is they need to understand that they cannot go back.
Oh, yes.
So not only can you not go back and add extra things to the inventory, but if you identify that they, as has happened many times, have not taken out the drawer on the washing machine and cleaned behind there, or cleaned the rim, or cleaned the cooker, or any of those things, they do not get the opportunity to come back and redo it. So 2 things. Number 1, that's why you would have the pre-checkout visit. So you can highlight that to them and say, okay, you need to remember to do that. But also why you remind them beforehand, when you give me back the keys and we do the checkout, that is it. Anything you haven't done, we will be making it painful. So you're right. Then we move on to using a third party. Why would you recommend using a third party, and why to do the checkout?
So first of all, if you have a third party, that person actually isn't known to the tenant. So there's not that familiarity. Is that the correct way? It's a big word for me.
It's a big word this early.
So there's not that familiarity with them. So the chit-chat drops away.
Yeah.
And the other thing is for them to keep on swinging around and telling this person, "Oh, but it was like that when I moved in." They've actually got the inventory in front of them, and quite frankly, they don't really know if that. Yeah. So it's an impersonal way of doing things. They don't have the connection with the third party. There's no emotion with the third party. The third party goes in, does their job, walks out.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you always have people saying that the deposit schemes prefer a third party inventory and checkout. I don't know. I kind of find we used to do them all ourselves, and we never had any issues with, or any reports back about being impartial or anything like that, and we were always pretty successful until it came to mould. So yeah, never really experienced that, but I do understand that yes, there's the whole impartiality side of things, so it can be ideal. And it also doesn't you don't risk souring relations between you and the tenant. It's a good point, because it's somebody else making that judgment and highlighting these things rather than you as agent or landlord. But I would say be careful. We did have one experience.
Yes, we did.
We had what we thought was not necessarily going to be a tricky checkout, but where the landlord had very specific expectations about a property.
Yes.
And so we got a third-party checkout person to do it. And in the garden, he hadn't seen any issue with the tenants putting a metal dustbin, and using it as a drum to burn things in, which had, of course, damaged the grass around the drum in the middle of this garden. Naturally, the landlord wasn't quite so happy about all the presence of said drum. And yes, so he'd written on there that it was fairly standard use and that the garden was in seasonal repair, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And although we made quite strong complaints in the claim against the deposit, the DPS basically went along with the fact that the inventory clerk had said it was in decent seasonal repair. And when I tackled the inventory clerk, he said that, well, he's from the country and that's what they do. They burn things in the middle of the garden.
But again,
in Parliament Green, they don't.
But this is where the impartial comes in the sense whereby
that's where the impartial failed.
Which is no, it didn't, because it did. He went in as an inventory clerk. That's what he went in for. Yeah. Whereas we know what the landlord's expectations are.
No, forget the landlord's expectations. I, as a normal human being, don't expect my beautiful lawn to end up with a dustbin in the middle of it and all the glass around it burned and singed. Talking about, I
know what you're saying, but I can't hear what the other side's saying.
No, the third party completely screwed up on that one, as far as I'm concerned. That's just outrageous. That's just absolutely outrageous. So I'd say be very careful who you use as your third party, and double check what they do and tackle it well in advance if you think that they've made an issue and need to correct it. So it's personal learning now. Anyway, number 4 is the need to be thorough, both before and during the checkout. So there's lots of things that could be covered in that, but what would be your top elements in being thorough?
And well, first you got to remember you can't go back. So you need to have that eye. For me, if I'm going to go in and I'm doing a move out inspection, it's your eye can pick up things very, very quickly. So, and you've got to be careful of that, because your eye's picking up stuff so quickly, you miss the other things that could be there.
Okay.
So as much as I go through and I go, oh, tung, tung, tung with my eyes, I also know that I have to slow down and I have to take a good look at the house.
Yes.
And I've noticed the one thing that we do have to be aware of or take into account, the cleaner the property, quicker the inspection.
Yep.
And that, then, the cleaner the property, the quicker the inspection, and then you actually miss stuff. What?
Yes.
Smiling.
I am smiling because this was a very early checkout that Kaz did. So normally we do now check each other's work if we do check it.
Yes.
But we did a very early one once upon a time, and the property was very clean, and there were no obvious damages or issues. And Kaz came back and said, yes, no, it's absolutely fine, I think. I'm setting you up here. I'm sorry, I am setting you up here. And then I went along myself. I can't remember why. Oh, yes, a smoke alarm was going off. We had a report from a tenant that a smoke alarm was going off. And I walked in and I was horrified because the tenant had painted. So everything was white. But it was the worst quality painting I'd ever seen in my entire life. It was a
bit of an over-exaggeration.
No,
but there we go.
Dreadful. They used matte paint on wood, and they'd kind of splashed it all over the place. It was very uneven, very patchy. But at first glance, you just look around and you think, yeah, everything is white. There's no dirt. There's no scuff marks. The whole place is clean and sparkly. But it was horrendous. And in the end, they actually paid. So although we put the claims through the DPS in the end, they actually came round, confirmed that, they and their relatives had done a really bad job, and it was all professionally painted again at their expense.
And this is where you had a very good communication with them as well.
Yeah, we did have.
Yes.
You can imagine we must have had good communication to get
the essence of it. That was in the very, very beginning.
But yeah, that was one of those things where you can have a look around and see the obvious and see the quick, but if you look in the wrong, if the light is the wrong, what am I trying to say? If it's not the brightest of days, or you're in a hurry or what have you, you can miss things that you later think, wow,
how did I miss that? Yeah.
So that's something we shall smile and remember on a regular basis. Anyway, so number 5 is getting your evidence together and making sure you have the right type of evidence. Now, I know I do more of this, Kaz, but when we say evidence, what are we talking about?
Okay, so when you say evidence, when you're taking photos, make sure that they've got a date stamp on them.
A damp stamp.
A date stamp on them, because when you're submitting them to the DPS, and this is going to follow on to another conversation for another day. So you need your date stamp on it. If you've got the inventory, and you can actually load up your evidence onto the move-out inventory, so it's easy for comparison. And you need to make your notes on the inventory as well to what is landlord and to what is on the checkout. On the checkout inventory, what is actually landlord and which is actually tenant. It needs to be quite clear.
Yeah.
Because not everything is going to be down to the tenant.
Yeah.
You need to say, look, you know what, wear and tear. And again, as a landlord, or even if you've got an agent doing it for you, this is where experience comes in. If you're a landlord and you're walking in and they've got a scratch on the wall and they've been there for 2 years, for us, that's going to be a bit of wear and tear. It doesn't mean that it needs repair. But this, again, always keep yourself, I have to say it, keep your bottom covered
Yeah.
then with the evidence.
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking now, and I haven't got it noted anywhere, about the need to remember who your tenant is. I think we do come on to be fair in the next one. Yes, we'll do that at that point. Or the next but one. But yeah, so you need to have a combination of a photo and text. So just as you would on an inventory, you'll have a picture of a particular item or pictures of a room, and you'll also have a description of exactly what you're looking at and the condition that it's in. And you would do the same on the checkout. And there will be elements of the checkout where it's a report for landlord and tenant to say, this is what needs to be done to this property to bring it back to standard and to get it ready for the next person. So some of that may be down to landlord, some of it may be down to tenant, and yeah, being clear. You can also use video, but I would say use video sparingly. But there were certain things, as I discovered the other day, where we had an issue with a dishwasher where the hinge had been broken and the dishwasher door was either open or closed. There was no video between. I realised that taking a picture of it open and of it closed was not particularly helpful. That's when you need a video. So just use it sparingly and make sure that they are short for anyone who's looking through them to actually be able to pinpoint, this is my issue.
Yeah, as a landlord, I would imagine, one of the quickest way to do and move out inventory would be to take a video of the whole house. And when you're submitting, so when you're submitting your evidence, if required, and you go to arbitration, the people that are doing the, what is the word? Rachel, come on, help me.
People looking at the dispute resolution.
Oh, there we go. They're not going to be bothered to go through your whole video. They don't have the time.
They all have instructions on what to do, but text and photos is generally best.
Way to
go. Okay, and do it in a timely manner. So we've already said about making sure that you don't go back again, because you can't go back. But actually doing the inspection, ideally with the tenant, but as soon as possible after the checkout, it will help avoid any disputes, because tenant can quite easily say, well, hang on, it's taken you 3 weeks to go in and do this. Anyone could have been into that property. I don't have the keys. That's not how I left it.
Yeah.
And also just in your general communication. So if you do a checkout report,
I need to go back to them.
I find particularly if it's going to be slightly contentious or there's going to be issues, get it back to them as soon as possible, even if it's in like first draft format.
I agree with that, yeah.
So be timely both on the checkout and your communications afterwards. And then being fair.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people like to think my house didn't look like that 5 years ago. I wanted to look like it did then. But you have to be fair about what your expectations are.
Well, people are living in there. That becomes their home. And I always, whenever I go into and doing a move out, checkout, inventory, then I always sit and go, okay, they don't live the way I live. They're not going to be as pedantic at washing the shower as I am. But at the same time, so there's a difference between my clean and a normal clean, to be fair.
Yeah, you never come around to my house.
So yeah, there is that. You've got to be fair. You've got to take into account wear and tear. You're not going to get your house back brilliantly white 5 years later. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think you also need to remember the length of the tenancy and who your tenants are.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a shared house, you can kind of expect that you're going to have more damage to everything. But if people have children, children, you're automatically going to have to repay. If they've got little children, you will have to be fair everywhere.
Big children, teenagers are just as sloppy as little children.
Yeah, so are doctors, but we won't go there.
No.
But no, if you have little children in a property, you're going to have little handprints at a lower level. So there are things like that. If you have a lot of people and you have children, you're going to have more wear and tear. So you just need to be aware of that, and that's going to affect any claim that you can potentially make for worn carpets, etc., stuff like that. And so you have to remember depreciation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go onto any of the deposit schemes, you can see what they use as their depreciation. I'm not going to go through all of it, but there are things like painting. So if you have a high traffic area, you're looking at probably 2 to 3 years as a life expectancy of the paint, and then they would expect you to be repainting. So you're going to be very unlucky if you try and claim for scuff marks in the hallway after a 2-year tenancy.
But that's going to be a good one for next week, though, I think.
I think we'll go into that in a bit more detail when we look at
it. For a landlord's perspective, they give appliances and that type of thing a lifespan.
Yes.
And as much as you think, oh, in my house it lasts for 6 years, the DPS has gone around and said, you know what, it only lasts for 3. I mean, you can't claim for it.
A lot of people do think that. I mean, I look at my house and I think my carpets have actually been in place for nearly 17 years now. And they're fine. No, and they're okay. They're absolutely fine. And yet we recently had to replace some after 6 years. And you just think,
and because you have to pay for them in your own house, so you take care of them.
Yeah,
that's another discussion for another day.
Absolutely.
Because, we're being structured.
But you're trying to do. And also, so don't be petty. No matter, it might be tempting sometimes to think, I'm going to claim for everything, There is an element where you just have to say, no, I'm moving on. I don't want any bad feeling. I'm just going to claim for the necessities. Remember, this isn't about betterment. So because somebody has damaged your worktop doesn't mean that you can claim for 2 brand new pieces of worktop because they're matching on either side when they've been in place for 8 years. Yeah. You cannot claim the full cost. This is not about betterment. You have to be fair. However, I don't think that fair necessarily covers cleaning.
Here we go.
I am a bit, We've actually
had to remember,
a number of times when cleaning has come up. Well, it's particularly galling when you say to people, I recommend you get this professionally cleaned because you've been here a long time, blah, 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 blah. And then you go around and it's not clean and they think that that's okay after a long time.
No, I just think,
no, it's happened too often. I remember somebody telling me that their oven was not clean when they moved in. It's like, well, it certainly didn't have chips in it. Chips in it. If it's not clean, would you move into a house that had somebody else's food in the oven? You wouldn't. So, or skyly.
In the drawers or stuff like that. Yeah, no.
The drawers is always a good one. Anyway, that's all bad stuff and we want to avoid that. So, once you've identified that stuff actually absolutely has to be done, the next step is to get quotes. So step number 8 is getting quotes. Any tips for how to get quotes?
Well, first of all, we have spoken about having a contractor in the past and having a good relationship with your contractor. But you do need to, when you go in and get your quotes, they cannot be inflated quotes. We've found, no, because we found with the cleaning, we would submit quotes on cleaning and stuff like that. And we're getting quotes for £40 an hour. And the DPS is going, we only pay out £20 an hour. Or some things to that effect. So they do have to be reasonable quotes.
They do, yeah. So there were cleaners and there were cleaners. And we did have one cleaner she did an excellent job, but was more than, and so they battered us down on that, which is, it is unfortunate. But also, I think when it comes to quotes, people often, because we've identified things that are tenant issues and we've identified things that are landlord issues, sometimes people will just get one big quote to cover the whole thing and say it needs to be itemized. It needs to be broken down to say this is the amount. And then you do need to look at the depreciation. So yes, you may have a quote for X, but then you can say, but we want to charge you Y because we appreciate that this wasn't you when it started.
Reasonable quote.
Which brings us back to onto item number 9, negotiate.
Yes. Because you have to negotiate with the tenant first, and then before you make a claim. I have a chat to you again. Communication. We always come back to the communication, the relationship you've got with your tenant, and try and come to a happy medium with them, so that you don't actually have to go to adjudication. My favourite word for today.
Yes, exactly. So you don't have to go there.
Yeah.
I kind of got slightly lost there. So negotiation is always key, and just keeping it kind of nice because you want to agree this amicably without going to talk to the deposit schemes. And then number 10 is letting the tenant know what the process is at the point that
negotiations have failed.
Negotiations have failed, basically. Yeah. We've not agreed that. So, the one thing that I find... Well, one thing that came up recently, I was talking to a landlord whose son had been renting a property with his friends, and there were things that the landlord wanted to claim for. and they didn't realise that they could dispute the amount. They thought that if they disputed, they wouldn't get any of their deposit back.
Wow.
And so they just agreed to it. I think it was like £350 or something that they were disputing, and it was like £1,500 for the whole deposit. And they thought if they disputed that, then they wouldn't get any money, and they all wanted to go their own different ways, and they needed the deposit for the next term's deposit. And so they just agreed. I think that's very wrong. So do explain to the tenant that, you can dispute a specific amount of money and you will still get the rest of the money back.
And I think, and some tenants, they don't realise that with us, we use the DPS, the Deposit Protection Scheme, and a lot of that is service.
I think it's service.
I thought it was scheme.
I don't know. I think it's service.
DPS. And there it is, actually, it's all via and linked to their website. So you go onto their website and you can click and it releases the deposit automatically. And we've had a similar case where we think somebody clicked the wrong button, and instead of disputing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no allowing for people going onto a system and clicking the wrong buttons. And, it's just, sometimes people and their money. Anyway. But yes, I mean, it is difficult as a landlord because you automatically give people at the start of the tenancy all the prescribed information and the terms and conditions of a deposit scheme. But people don't read them. Generally they don't read them. They don't read them, and then they
get their deposit certificate, and I don't know where that goes.
The terms and conditions is like pages, and it's really small print, and nobody reads it. So yes, you provide it. So it is worth, as landlords, you should know the schemes, the service probably better than they do. So it's worth explaining to them how that works, or at least pointing them back to the website and saying, have a look there, or giving them the phone number.
Or giving them a direction.
Please call them if you've got any concerns about your deposit. But really, the idea of you have to agree to this or you won't get your deposit back, I think that's an unfortunate thing that I've seen far too often.
Yeah, that's not fair.
So those are our 10 top tips.
Yes, that's right.
So prepare in advance, make sure the tenant understands the process, use a third party, be thorough at the time of doing it, get your evidence together, do everything in a timely manner, be fair, be reasonable, get reasonable quotes, negotiate with your tenant, and make sure they fully understand the process and where you go once the tenancy has ended.
Sounds good.
I think that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And almost within 30 minutes. So next week, what do you have coming up next week? What's on your agenda?
Well, next week I've got maintenance between tenancies to arrange.
You do, between tenancy maintenance is absolutely coming up. It always happens after a checkout. Yep.
And then we've got check-ins to arrange as well. So
check-ins to prepare for, yeah. I mean, it's amazing. It is the same old at the moment where things come onto the market. So tenant moves out, property's available, gone and moved ridiculously quickly. It's very quick, the turnaround now. So although we're just doing the checkout, we are now getting ready for the move-ins on that. So for me, I'm doing more salesy stuff. More salesy stuff for me, and also I've got deposits to go through, so we will come on to deposits.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think sometimes landlords are like, yeah, I want this money, and we're going, hey, you can't have it.
Yeah, and it's not immediate as well. Yeah. There is some.
Sorry about that.
But the other exciting news in Enfield at the moment is, of course, that today is the meeting for the A10 races. That's at the... I'm going to go to that. That's at 7 o'clock today. It's at...
That's Mazeta.
It's on Main Road. I think it's the Wheat Sheep on Main Road. So I'm going to go there at 7 o'clock tonight to see what happens.
I'm actually hoping, well, I won't be there, but I'm actually hoping it should be well attended.
I think it should be very well attended. I'm imagining
it well attended.
There is going to be an MP there. I think Farrell Clark is going to be there. So it's going to be very well attended. And hopefully we haven't scared you too much with this episode on checkouts. Yeah, we will come into the specifics next week about not just numbers of deposit claims and that sort of thing. But basically, the majority of things are avoidable if you have a good relationship with your tenant already. Yes. And on that happy note, it's bye from us. Bid you a good week. Thanks. Bid you a good week. I don't know what it is.
Before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And we'd really appreciate your support. So if you can leave us a review or share with your friends, that'd be great. We'd also love to hear from you if you've got any ideas for topics that you'd like us to discuss. Please send us an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.